Hi, I'm currently stuck in purgatory. I was playing Resident Evil 6 the other day, and I called it a really bad game. And I don't think the horror game gods appreciated that, and as punishment, they stuck me in the universe of every horror game ever. Really sucks out here. But I made a new friend though. He's super tall, really pale, like deathly pale. Like he's just pure white skin. And he's always wearing a tuxedo. I don't know why he decides to wear a tuxedo. We're in the middle of the fucking forest, but if he wants to do it, I'm gonna hand him the camera. I guess we're just gonna film the video here. I'm gonna hand him the camera, and we'll just get started on the filming. Wait a second. Super tall, kind of like really pale. Always wears that. Sounds familiar. Sounds like a horror game. I got it. Well, I've been running for so long, it is now daytime, and I don't know where the hell I am. I guess we'll just have to resume the video here, I guess. Maybe if I start talking positively about video games, maybe the horror game gods will let me out of this hell they've put me in. Horror games. Some good, and some just absolutely horrible. In my opinion, horror as a genre is at its best when it's told through a video game. While books can build tension and atmosphere, they can't actively scare you. While movies are able to immerse you and scare you, video games just do the same thing, but better. In a movie, you are only watching what's happening. You have no way of controlling anything that's going on. But in a video game, not only are you immersed in the world building, the story, and the characters, but what adds to it is that you are controlling what happens. You are making every decision. You are the character. And that is what adds a whole nother level of horror. Now, there are two types of horror games in my opinion. We have psychological horror, and then there's the pants-pissing type of horror. Let's start with the first one, psychological horror. Psychological horror games are designed to let the world around you and stories scare you. They rarely ever rely or even go in for a jump scare. Stuff like Doki Doki Literature Club, for example. Doki Doki Literature Club is a game that at first just seems like a normal anime dating simulator that you would be terrified of your parents walking in on you playing, but as time goes on, things start to get more and more weird. The topics become more and more dark and depressing. The world you get used to starts breaking right in front of you. Now, in between the two different types of horror games I mentioned, there is a nice middle ground, and in my opinion, those are my favorites. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Fatal Frame. Games like those, in my opinion, are what does horror the best. Let's use Resident Evil 7 as an example. Yes, this game definitely has jump scares, don't get me wrong. But in my opinion, these jump scares really only work as a result of the psychological horror and world building that this game is presenting to you. If the tension of the Baker house didn't have you on edge, then Jack Baker wouldn't really be scary at all. He would just be some random dude that's overly friendly and inviting towards his family. Bendy and the Ink Machine is another example of this. Very few jump scares in that game. It just used the atmosphere of Disney-like characters being evil to amplify the scares. Personally, I think Bendy and the Ink Machine is dead body. Oh God, I really hope this guy's okay. Oh. It's like Resident Evil, you know, dead body, I gotta loot it, there's an herb. What am I just supposed to like eat this?
Dude, it's just my potted plant. Home Depot.
Now, let's talk about the other type of horror games, the pants pissing one. Now, these type of games specifically, their whole purpose is to make a 15-year-old screaming so loud at 1 a.m. that their parents get mad at them. Outlast, Five Nights at Freddy's, even like PT, and many more have one goal, to scare the absolute shit out of you. While these games have atmosphere and world building,
they definitely more so rely on jump scares. And some people find it cheap. Others, like myself, enjoy random cheap jump scares. It's like comparing The Conjuring to The Blair Witch. Both are horror, but each approach the genre completely differently.
Well, at this point we've been talking about a bunch of good horror games. Maybe let's talk about some of the bad ones, you know? And let's start with the game that got me in this whole mess in the first place. Resident Evil 6.
Resident Evil 6, it's an interesting game. It runs fine, it plays fine, but it just doesn't feel like Resident Evil. It feels like an action-based side game in the same universe. We look at the Resident Evil games I've talked about before, and Resident Evil 6 just doesn't look like it's in that same series, you know? I personally didn't like the mechanics very much. The whole 2-character co-op type of deal, it's cool when you have someone with you, but again, to me, that doesn't feel like Resident Evil. It feels like a side game. Some other games, you know, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, that game was horrible. It's just Gears of War, but like a Resident Evil skin over it. It's not even a good copy of Gears of War. Silent Hill Downpour, you know, these games are just bad and not fun to play.
While we still get a bunch of our AAA horror games, you know, the Resident Evils and as of recently a Silent Hill remake, personally I do think the indie games are what's keeping this scene alive, you know?
Indie games have been absolutely carrying the horror genre in my opinion. I've already mentioned a few, you know, Bendy Indie Machine, stuff like that, but let's talk about some more. Poppy's Playtime was really impressive, terrifying, and a well-crafted game. And there's also this whole genre of PS1 and PS2 style horror games that indie teams do so well. While these indie teams may be doing those PS1 and PS2 styles of horror games for more cost-effective reasons, it also just works because of the nostalgia. Hell, sometimes the indie horror games are just more memorable than the big budget releases. Five Nights at Freddy's, Murder House, Iron Lung, Mortuary Assistant, Amnesia, Phasmophobia, all those have made lasting impressions, and sometimes I just remember those more than I do the big AAA horror games.
I gotta get out of here, guys. I can't take this anymore. I tried to go to my favorite game store the other day, and I walked up to the counter, went to go buy a game, and the cashier was like, "Oh, what are you buying?" He was probably just doing his job, but I didn't want to take any chances, so I just ran out of there. I'm gonna go try to find some shelter. Luckily, there is a castle just over there over by the snow, so I think I'm gonna try to take shelter there for the night before it gets dark.
Oh, hi miss, you must be the owner. Oh my god, you're tall. Starting over.